Hey, how you doing? Welcome to School Night TV, where we live in a 24/7 world of trying to understand things that may have no understanding. And that's really one of the biggest existential issues we deal with. It's the existential question, and it's not even a question because we don't know if there is a question to ask. Um, and it leads people all kinds of different directions. One of them is the person who's sort of agnostic, but they have this approach that's, and I'm not talking about religion or spirituality here. I'm talking about just a general view on things. But I think we can use the same words like agnostic. I think everyone knows what that means. What that means. Um, but there's those people who this world of trying to understand things that may or may not have an understanding. One of the approaches to that is the person who says, "There's something to understand, but there's something to understand, but I don't know what it is yet, and maybe I never will." And that's sort of a nice approach. That's sort of the person who says, "I'm spiritual but not religious," or "I kind of think this, but I'm not totally sure I'm right about anything." And that person is generally a good person to talk to. And then there's the other person who also says there is something to understand and I understand it, or I believe in a system that's helping me understand it, or I listen to a guy who understands it. And it's easy to hear that and kind of think sinister thoughts. A lot of the criticisms of organized religion come to mind, and I don't want to go into that because that's just not something I'm that passionate about at this point in my life, and I haven't been since I was a teenager. I don't think, like, the idea of rallying against organized religion, because there's obviously a lot of value, and I think the older you get, the more you see that there's a value, a bigger picture level value to believing in in just believing there is something to understand and that we have avenues toward understanding it. If Even if the only reason for that is just to make our lives better and the lives around us better, and we're lying to ourselves, there is some value to that. And so I can't just say it's all bad. I hate the whole religions for sheeple, and I'm embarrassed to even use that phrase on here. Sheeple, again, I say it and it pains me, but that's that sort of mindset. It's the teenager with the black shirt with white writing, the Hot Topic shirt, who is rallying against their aunt and grandma who mentioned Jesus at the dinner table, or that kind of thing. But still, it's there. I think you are lying to yourself if you believe there is an absolute understanding to anything and that you have the path toward that understanding. So it's a delicate balance between, following systems or developing your own systems to help you cope with the fucking chaos and clusterfuck of everything versus lording it over people or being arrogant. And there's a lot of arrogance on the other side. Because with this whole, the whole question of understanding, it's really kind of a gray area, a gray circle around the idea. And on the opposite side of that circle is the more atheistic approach, which is just there is nothing to understand. And there's value to that. There's value to saying, hey, there's nothing to understand. I'm going to build my own ship. And try to do right by people and right by myself and figure out my own system. There's some value to that. But again, saying there is no understanding, uh, it's just as bad in terms of, it's just as, I guess you're lying as just as much as someone who says there is an understanding, unless, you have some great insight. And what's funny about that, the person who says there is nothing to understand, in order to know that, you have to have a similar sort of, like, something must have spoken to you and told you that. You know what I mean? Like, religious people can always say God spoke to me and told me that there is a way. There is this, blah, blah, blah. God told me he's real, man. I believe him. But on the other side, the atheist has this absolute view of things. And of course, I have to use these religious examples, but I just want to stress again that I'm not talking about religion explicitly. I'm talking about anything, because people form religions out of literally anything they can. They form that cult-like thinking about everything. It's a component to what we do. And when you have a group involved, it just goes crazy from there. Everyone goes crazy once you get a group all, on that same page. I'm losing my words. But yeah, in order to say there is no understanding, it requires a similar sort of epiphany, but you can't say God told me there's no understanding, or God told me there's no God. Hey guys, there's no God. God told me. So I think the best approach really is just to, say there may or may not be something to understand. That agnostic sort of approach. And speaking of understanding, I've had some flies in my house. I love how quickly I came to no point with that whole understanding topic, because there's really nowhere to go, and you just end up in one of those annoying philosophical discussions, like a classroom full of college students in my head. That's what that was. That's what that intro was. That whole intro about understanding. It was basically a classroom full of college students just saying nothing. A big fat nothing. It's weird. My entire outlook changes with every new book I read. Which is kind of how it should be, but sometimes people will, I don't know. I don't need to go into that. But yeah, anyway, so speaking of things I don't understand, or that may or may not have something to understand, I've had a bunch of flies in my house in the past week, and I've never had an issue with flies. My landlord did some work, and there was a hole in my ceiling for a week, and it's still wet up there. Who knows what attracts these things. But, in the last couple of years, I used to be somebody who killed every spider or insect that came into my house, or even outside my house, just killed every insect now. But I was that type of guy. Definitely any kind of spider would get smashed. And I've decided to let spiders live, but not all spiders. And I don't really have a scale that I follow, or a real system. But if it's one of those big, grotesque ones who looks like it could fuck me up, I kill it. Or I do my best to kill it. And I absolutely, stand on my tippy toes like an elephant afraid of a mouse. But basically, I kill any spider that isn't scary to me. And I've become much more tolerant than I ever was over that. And that's kind of extended to insects as well, except to ants. Ants get any death I can give them. But I had this fly in my house the other night, and I hadn't seen a fly in my house in really ever. And I was like, I'm going to try to let him live. And there's something a little, it's not just out of pure empathy that I want to let flies live. Another reason is that I had this event as a kid, and I'm not going to call it a traumatic event, because I think the word trauma gets thrown around a lot, and I don't want to be another person throwing it around. Let's just say it was a life event that really sucked, and I'll remember it forever. And I think that describes a lot of what people call trauma. I mean, there's people who have had some serious trauma, and knowing people who have had some serious trauma is the reason why I don't throw it around, especially because it's become kind of a socio-political buzzword. And there's a rant. There's a rant for tomorrow. But I won't throw it around. I'll say a life event happened that really sucked, and I'll always remember it. And I was at my neighbor's house, this kid, and we smashed a fly against the windowsill, and larvae came out, all these little tiny worms, and it was horrifying. We ran and we got his mom, and she was this happy-go-lucky lady, and she just looked at it and was just so upset, and she was like, "Oh my God, it's maggots." I'll never forget her saying that. It's maggots. And we were horrified. And to this day, I'm horrified by the memory of that. And so that's one reason I don't like to smash flies. But I did smash one in my house a couple years ago, and the fucking worms came out, And that doesn't happen every time. But it was on a windowsill too. So there's some old wives' tale thing here where it's like, never smash a fly on a windowsill on a Tuesday, or it's maggots, something like that. But yeah, a couple years ago, and all these larvae came out, and they were awful. It was like so sad too. And I remember just spraying them because I didn't want to like put them in a tissue and know that there was just this thin paper membrane between them and my hand. So I sprayed them and like watched. It was just like the fly that I sprayed to death. Have I even gotten to that? I don't even think I've gotten to that part of the story. So I'm getting there. Uh, I'm jumping ahead of myself. I'm ruining my own stories here. I always knew I would get here where I ruin my own stories as I'm telling them, as if there's anything to ruin. But so I don't smash flies, and I had this fly in my house the other night, and he was on my heater, and my outlook on flies has kind of changed too, because I was reading that Rob Bresney book, that hippie fucking Rob Bresney book that I loved actually, and there's a quote about the fly, and I can't remember what it said, so I'm not going to try and do it justice. But he was quoting somebody else, and it basically was in praise of the fly, and kind of like, using I think it even referred to like thinking of the fly as a spirit animal. It really honestly changed my perspective on the fly, and it kind of played into the whole like a fly on the wall sort of thing, and it might even have referenced that and like sort of the value of being a fly on the wall. Like, why did I even bother trying to explain it? Because I don't remember it. But anyway, it changed my outlook on flies. And then a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, maybe it was around Christmas, I was reading the comic Elric. And Elric is a great surreal fantasy comic. This is the original run from the 80s. I think they still do it. But the art in the original run is just wonderful, like very colorful, strange. The story, it's based on a novel that I haven't read, but that original comic run is like I am only one collection in. I'm only one collection in, but so far it's incredible. But anyway, there's a part where a god comes to Elric as a fly, and I started calling myself Elric. Not always, but I'll kind of think of myself as Elric because it sounds like Eric. But if it sounds like my name, it feeds my ego. Just another thing to add some fuel to my ego. My ego. Lego my ego. So this god comes in the form of a fly and lands on him and smiles at him. And just that reminded me of the Rob Bresney book. So then this fly appearing, landing on my heater kind of reminded me of all that. And I was like, I'm not going to kill him. And I ended up hurting him outside with this weird strainer thing that I'm not sure how it ended up at my house. This metal strainer, this big one. And I just kind of like herded him out. And I wish I would have recorded that instead of this bullshit. Just me like dancing around like a sword fighter with this big metal strainer trying to herd a fly out my door. And I succeeded. And it was really difficult, but I was very proud of myself that I got him outside. Then the next day I come in. 2 more flies are in my house, so obviously something's going on. And at that point I'm like, I've just got to kill him. I can't do the dance of getting him outside, the strainer dance every time. So I just sprayed this one with Windex, and it was, I was still feeling empathetic, and I did it, it was one of those like, this is going to hurt me a lot more than it's going to hurt you sort of moments. And I just doused this fly in Windex, and he began to fly lower and lower. And he eventually landed on my kitchen floor, and I sprayed him a couple more times, and he was just soaked. And the reason I'm doing this is I keep getting ahead of myself, is because he was on my kitchen floor, just slower and slower, crawling, just doused in Windex. And it was so dramatic and so painful to watch. It was seriously cinematic. It was probably the most dramatic creature death I've ever seen in person. It was a fly doused in Windex crawling across my kitchen floor. It was horrible. And before he died, I scooped him up in a Kleenex and flushed him. Because there's no grave at sea like a toilet. Burial at sea, baby. Flush them down. But so since then, I've been killing them with chemicals. I did herd one more outside because I wanted to see if I could do it, and I did get him outside. But each time I come home, there's at least 2 more, and so they've been getting sprayed. They've been getting the spray, and I started spraying with Lysol. And the first one that I sprayed with Lysol, it took a lot of sprays, and he ended up like flying down and hiding, or like he just managed his way down in the bottom of an LP box, like a record for shipping records, and it had a bunch of stuff in it. And so he disappeared from sight, and I was like, well, he's going to die in there. I'm just going to leave him be. And it was quiet for about a minute, and then I heard its death throes. It was just these two very loud buzzes, like these explosive buzzes, and it was like, holy shit, I just heard his death throes, and it was really dramatic too. So these two fly deaths were just so fucking dramatic. But since then, I've lost all my empathy, and when I come home and there's flies, I almost get excited when I see one like perched somewhere where I know I can just get him with a good spray. It's like once I got comfortable killing them, and I decided that they were my enemy, I get this perverse thrill out of it, and I don't want them here. Like, I'm not thrilled that they're in my house. Like, and that's another thing too, because like I was thinking about that. I was like, why am I so upset? I don't want them laying their fucking it's maggots, around here. But at the same time, like, they're pretty harmless. They just kind of buzz around and they're annoying. But they're kind of like that kid in school who, like, there was that kid in, say, elementary school who was nice, and he would kind of be friendly to you, and like maybe kind of wanted to be your friend, and you had nothing against him, and there wasn't really like, and it's not even really a social stigma thing, but it was like he smelled bad. He came to school smelling like shit and lacked self-awareness, and just kind of brought a cloud of stink with him and made you feel gross, so you just couldn't be friends with him. That's like what a fly is like coming into your house. It's like this thing that really doesn't cause that many problems. Like, it's not going to bite you, although I have been bit by a fly. I remember it. I remember seeing it bite me. I was on a trail. See, I'm justifying the murders now. I'm justifying, fuck. Justifying. I'm just-a-flying. Started out as like a bad pun, and now just-a-flying around. Terrible, dude. But that was completely unintentional, by the way. I'm not a pun guy. I'm not a pun guy. I'm just not one of them pun guys. Not one of them pun guys. But yeah, one did bite me once. But anyway, like, in general, they don't bother you, but they're just kind of like that stinky kid that kind of lowers your stock. Because if you got flies in your house, that you don't want to be a person who has flies buzzing around your house, So anyway, it's funny to me though how quickly I went though from like, you're actually kind of cute sitting on my heater. I'm gonna try to herd you outside. I'm gonna herd you outside. I don't know what the repetition's all about. It seems necessary tonight. But I went from this gentle giant, just trying to help the fly out, get him out of here, to just, ruthlessly spraying them with, a demonic glint in my eye. Nothing to understand. My entire life is based around killing flies. My daddy killed flies, and my granddaddy kills flies, and we kill flies, and that's how we understand the world. We don't have to worry if there's a question to answer or if there's anything to understand out there in the universe, because we just kill flies. What else is on my mind? I guess in crazy news, I really escalated my running. Today I ran for 2 hours and 15 minutes, and hard running. And just 2 days ago, I ran for 2 hours after 4 days of about an hour and 15-minute run. So I'm really escalating the runs, and it just blows my mind. Escalating the runs sounds great. It blows my mind just that it's possible. I come from this approach to fitness where I kind of hate fitness culture, but there are some obvious things you have to do. There's things that you can eat that are better for you. There's exercises you can do. You want to make sure to, have good form and all that. But beyond that, like, I hate Fitbits. I hate calorie counting. I don't weigh myself. I think all that shit is toxic, honestly. And if it works for you, it works. If your Fitbit works for you, then you're not worried about what I'm saying. And that's a funny thing about insecurity, because if you're doing something and it's working for you, you don't really worry about criticism. You don't worry when someone has an opinion of it. Because I know that if I were to say, fuck Fitbits, and someone uses a Fitbit, there's a lot of people who would take personal offense to that. They'd think like, well, I use a Fitbit. My Fitbit works for me. I've lost 5 pounds. I can fit into those pants. And that's a funny thing too, like those goals. Like I have this goal. I need to lose 5 pounds by my wedding. I want to be able to fit into this size pants. That just kind of goes against my whole philosophy, which is you know what to do, so do it. And keep doing it, and you're going to look in the mirror and notice a difference. But beyond the vanity of the mirror, which just draws you in no matter what, there's no way to avoid that. And I think the harder you try to avoid that vanity, the more vain you are, honestly. And I think there's a delicate balance between just being that person, that Adonis who stares in the mirror all the time and just thinks too highly of yourself. There's a balance between being that and being the person who is like anybody who puts hard work in and then looks in the mirror sucks. They got a big ego, They call them they don't call them mirrors where I come from. They call them ego windows. But there's a balance between that, and I think it's okay to be a little vain, but I think there's vanity to trying too hard to not be vain. But anyway, to go back to what I was saying, like the person who, if you're critical of a certain thing or a certain approach to something, and it's not just the Fitbit, it could be anything. It could be a philosophy. It could be what I was talking about with understanding. Like if you're a person who says, I think this works perfect. If you're a person who says, there is something to understand in life, and I understand it. Okay, it's a little bit arrogant, but if I turn around and I say, I don't think there's any way to know that. I don't think there's any way to know if there's anything to understand, and there's no way to actually, even if there is something to understand, there's no way to know that you actually do understand it, blah, blah, blah. I could go over that whole topic again and just make this video completely useless. But I could say that and somebody would be like, well, no, read the Bible, or whatever they say. Read Darwin's Evolution of the Species. That explains everything. It's like, it explains evolution, but there's no understanding there. But once again, if it works for you, it works for you, and nothing I can say would stop that, because if it's working for you, why would you abandon that because of me? And it's the same for like a Fitbit. If your Fitbit works for you and it does what you need it to do, me saying fuck Fitbits shouldn't make you question anything. You should just be like, oh, well, Fitbits don't work for that guy. Whatever. But people are extremely insecure, and I think they do get defensive if you were to say fuck Fitbit and they have a Fitbit, that kind of thing. It's in us, that insecurity, and it rules us too much. It rules us too much. Too much insecurity. It's just ruling us. Who's the mayor of this town? Is it me? I know I won by a huge margin, but it seems to me that it's insecurity that's running this town. That'd be a good skit, or that'd be a good story, now that I'm thinking of it, like a guy running for mayor. I just want to avoid the whole topic of like presidential elections. I never want to think about those again, really. And not because of who won or didn't win. I just never want to think about that again. That was one of the most toxic periods I remember on all sides. But let's not get political. You getting politica? Political? Politica? This is my daughter, Politica. As you can see, I'm very interested. I studied political science. Where are we going? We're spiraling. Yeah, but no, a good idea for a story, and I just thought of it because of that whole, like, who's the mayor of this town, me or insecurity? Is the idea of, like, somebody running against something like that, because, everyone talks about fear. It's a platform of fear, but running against the concept of insecurity itself, it's a little too abstract. It's a bad idea. Let's just leave it at the mayor joke I made a minute ago. Just ruining everything. You're just ruining everything. You're stepping on your own toes. You know what your biggest problem is? You're just stepping on your own toes. Someone's got to step on them. Might as well be me. What else we got? I like the idea of doing a random kind of fireside chat. I haven't been doing these as much lately because I haven't really had, like, themes, and I'm always kind of thinking of the same things. And we're actually, close to 25 minutes, which actually isn't a bad time. Yo, that ain't a bad time to wrap this whole thing up, you know. It's kind of a good time. It's, not quite a half hour, not quite, uh, it's about as long as I spend, grooming myself. A good 25 minutes. Give me 25 minutes, I'm going to groom myself in the morning. They call me, no, they don't call me anything. They don't call me anything because there's nothing to understand, and, except your Fitbit. Exercise is cool. I feel like I've really benefited from running. Running has been the missing link in my life, and it's allowed me much more freedom than I ever thought possible, honestly. It feels incredibly freeing to just be running and to be, once you're in that mode, when you're in that state and your body, you're just like a locomotive, but it feels smooth. Sometimes you feel like a land speeder just floating on the surface, cruising. But kind of like with the whole fuck Fitbit thing, I'm also not somebody who likes to count the miles that I run or the minutes. I have general time goals, and it started out where, like, as I kind of built up, because I've been running for about a year and a half, only a year and a half. It feels like a much longer amount of time, but I've escalated the amount that I run and how hard I run and all that. And I reached a point where I was running for an hour each time, and that was always kind of my target goal. But then over the last 6 months or so, I've kind of reached a point where I'll add on 15 minutes to a half hour, and I run pretty hard unless I'm sore. I don't sprint necessarily, but I run pretty hard up and down hills and all that. And I'm trying not to brag here, because I think the problem is, like, I run, so hard, and I've been running for so long. But for me, it's more just like, it's crazy to think about. It's not about, like, look what I accomplished, like, pat myself on the back, blah, blah, blah. It's more just about, like, this is crazy. It's just crazy to be doing this. And what I've gotten to, though, in the last week is, about 3 or 4 days in a row, I ran very rigorously for about an hour and 15 to an hour and 20, and I was just incredibly sore at the end of that week, and I decided, I was like, I'm going to go for one more run and just push myself. And I ended up running for 2 hours, which is the most I've ever gone, and it was, who knows what distance that was. And then I took yesterday off. This was 2 days ago, the 2-hour run, and then I took yesterday off, went for just a little stroll, and today I ran for 2 hours and 15 minutes of hard running. And like I said, I don't count my miles, and I kind of want to, because I have some ideas in mind for, I don't like goals, especially, I don't like fitness goals. I just like working harder and escalating. But I am contemplating running a marathon or something like that later in the year. So I do want to keep pushing myself, and I should track my mileage now and again, just so I can prepare if I do want to do that. But it's, my philosophy on that, like, not, I don't check my weight. I don't have a pair of pants I want to fit into. I need to fit into my wedding dress, in 5 weeks, and I want to lose this many pounds. I think that's all very toxic. And once again, though, if it works for you, it works for you. I can't say anything to take that away. But for me, I just don't like that aspect of fitness culture. So it's really just been an interesting experiment in like, and I think actually, in hating a lot about fitness culture, I think that actually gives me a lot more energy to get fit. I think that spite, that sort of like, fuck all that, I'm going to do it my own way. And fortunately, your own way is really simple. Put on a pair of good shoes. They don't have to be super expensive. By good shoes, I just mean running shoes. Listen to your body. Don't push yourself too hard. Drink a lot of water. Try to get good form. Minimize the amount that you run on concrete. Although this time of year it's hard, with the daylight hours being what they are. But still, it's not that hard. Just do it. I feel like Nike really, the true, the only motivational quote I like is Nike's fucking slogan. The worst corporate bullshit. I don't buy Nike. This isn't me condoning or endorsing Nike. Although if they want to throw me money, I'm open. How crazy would that be? Me getting sponsored by Nike. But still, it's one of those things where you fucking push yourself and you do it. And I never thought that it would feel as good as it does. I never thought it would feel as good as it does to run 2 hours and 15 minutes of grueling, just pushing, sweating yourself. It's weird. Like when you sweat that much too, it's like your sweat forms sweat, or like you end up with like beads of salt like on your head. It's gross. But anyway, I'm spiraling out, and we're actually over a half hour. I should have closed it off at 25 minutes. Nothing to understand except running and killing flies and hating Fitbits. That's what a life is. Those three things. Sign up for my newsletter. I'll tell you more about those great subjects.